This is Levi Fuller at Dexter Media Gallery for our first hybrid in-person online artist talk. I'm here in the gallery space, giving you a little bit of a tour. And Peter is down the hall in the studio. And just want to welcome you all, both the in-person folks and the streaming folks. And you should definitely make a point to schedule a visit. You can drop us an email, jsp@jackstraw.org, or give us a call, 206-634-0919, and we'll get you scheduled. The show is open through, I think we're actually going to extend it a week, so I think it's open through January 21st, if that's okay with Peter. We just decided.
This just in.
This just in. You guys are getting the just news hot off the presses here. So yes, schedule a visit. Come on down. You'll have the gallery all to yourself. You can spend some time. My phone camera does not really convey the experience, which is why it's a physical installation in a gallery. Thanks so much to our funders who help keep our artist residency programs going. The New Media Gallery program is one of our artist residencies here at Jack Straw. City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, Port Culture, King County Lodging Tax Fund, Washington State Arts Commission, Arts Fund, Rainier Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and of course individuals. We really appreciate your individual donations of any size. We are currently raising money to support these programs. If you can visit us at jackstraw.org, you can find out how to do that. We appreciate, again, all of your donations. And it's really been a pleasure to have Peter here. And with that, I will hand it back to Joel in the studio and Peter in the studio.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Levi. I think I can share the screen now, and I think that's probably the best bet. First of all, let me thank Jack Straw Cultural Center for hosting me. It has been a terrific experience being here. Folks have been unbelievably supportive. Highly recommend that you come down, check the show out in person. It's produced to be an immersive experience, so I think it's best even experienced individually in the space. So if you have the time, make a reservation, come down, check it out. Really appreciate y'all. And thanks for the support to everyone at Jack Straw and all the engineers for making this possible. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here. All right. Great, we should be up and running. I'm gonna minimize, no one wants to see me, but you should be able to kind of see here. I have a video as well that I'd like to show that kind of gives you an idea of the soundscape, but I'll do that at the end. And right now it's just kind of a PDF of images. So again, thank you so much to Jack Straw for hosting me. My name is Peter Christenson. I'm an artist currently based in Seattle. I'm a professor at Washington State University. This project is part of a longer sort of ongoing project of works under this umbrella called Psychologue Artist. So this talk will be, I will introduce a few works to kind of give you an idea of what my practice is like to date, and then kind of shift into a discussion about the current work that's installed in the space. So Psychologue Artistry, I think that's how I'm going to pronounce it. So the art practice of diagnosing as art, or maybe something less redundant. So this is my artist talk. Okay, so I am a formerly licensed psychotherapist and an artist, so I fuse those together under this umbrella moniker called Psychologue Artist. So a quick sort of bio here. I'm a creative activist, I'm a social worker, and a conceptual artist primarily. And I work across media and form. So I use technology a lot, kind of antiquated and emergent technologies. I use what I call psychosocial sculpture, which is really a Joseph Beuys term, social sculpture, and I've incorporated the psycho element into that, heavy on the psycho and heavy on the psychology as well. I work a lot in video and sound, performative-based work, and immersive installation. That said, I make art that's site-specific, it's inclusive, and it's multimedia. For the past decade or so, like I've said, I've been making work under the moniker psychologardist, classifying my creative projects with a specific diagnostic code from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So if you don't know what the DSM, we'll get a really good briefing of what that is in this sort of brief talk. But it's a widely accepted instrument for psychiatric diagnosis. So my art is psychiatric coded. So I use these DSM codes to document these sort of like self-administered therapeutic processes. I hope that it posits my interdisciplinary practice as a psychosocial intervention of sorts. And I see it as a kind of a longitudinal qualitative case study of self and community and an exploration into identity, pathology and breakthrough, and really the human condition. So the DSM, real quickly, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We are on the 5th edition, the DSM-5. What you'll find in the gallery, actually, and I'll talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, is a very early iteration of psychiatric disorders, I guess, or pathologies, pre-DSM, kind of when it was just an encyclopedia kind of symptoms, essentially, kind of hoping to categorize these various diagnoses. This is obviously an evolving study. Psychiatry is pretty new. And so, as I'll talk about, my work is obviously heavily influenced by my practice as a psychotherapist, but I'm also critiquing, I think, not only the industry of art making, but also the industry of psychiatry and the institution of psychiatry. So sometimes there's some humor, some irony present in the work that's meant to sort of ask some questions or provide inquiry into this study. So in the United States, the DSM functions as universally accepted. That's kind of a funny comment. Sort of in the US, it's universally accepted instrument for psychiatric diagnosis. Treatment recommendations and therapeutic intervention models are often determined by DSM classifications and coding. So I love this book. I love the ease. I suppose like I say here, simultaneously love and abhor. So I love it and I hate it simultaneously. The ease at which we can sort of compartmentalize, put people in groups, label, the way we can fix or abandon or marginalize or ameliorate. And so it's kind of a weird duality, I think. So there's this mapping of the psyche. I love the process. I think there's a lot to critique about it as well. Like I said, I think it's an evolving process. So folks are certainly open to the critique of that. So I recently did an interview with Digital America, a digital culture journal, and they asked me, I thought this was kind of important. So they say, you're a former social worker and licensed psychotherapist. You describe your projects as intermedia. It's a longitudinal qualitative case study. The results of this approach are projects with a wide scope and a generous amount of satire, irony, and humor. What inspires you to create these broader collective projects? What have you learned about this approach to collective works over the years? And I wanted to address the humor and the irony in the work. So my response was, I see it's one part institutional critique, So like I said, critiquing the institution of psychiatry and also the institution of art making. And then I think it's one part lubricant, is the way I put it, to address serious and sometimes pathological or traumatic issues, things that I see in myself and things that I see in my community. And kind of the hope here is to make these discussions more palatable or normalized, in quotation marks. So art for me, just like psychotherapy, is a communicative medium. It's a way to communicate. And they both manifest as tools to intervene, to listen, and to learn. And also, I think, to have fun. I think psychotherapy is a lot of fun. It's also very challenging, but on both sides, it can be really fruitful. So with that, so if you have kind of an idea of where my practice is at and kind of the umbrella that I'm operating, at least over the last decade, I'm going to show a couple examples of projects, and then I'll go and then to kind of showcase how this diagnostic coding works within my work, and then talk about the project that's in Jack Straw New Media Gallery right now. So if you just look at this photograph right now, not wearing your psychotherapy lens here, we're not Freud here, we're just looking at this. It's very clearly maybe just two people in love in Amsterdam taking a photo of them kissing. There's also, you might wonder who's has a camera in the face of these people. That's me, right? Quite literally with a big lens taking a photograph of them, totally oblivious to my photographing them, photographing themselves, which gets pretty meta, which gets us into, if I were to diagnose a situation like this and to make a series, I might give this sort of a depersonalization disorder. So this is a project, this is an ongoing series that I've been working on where I photograph people essentially taking selfies of themselves around the world. And no one has ever said anything to me, not surprising, because they're completely oblivious to me watching them in this odd voyeuristic way of them sort of capturing these moments. So just to kind of give you an idea here of what the diagnostic criteria is for depersonalization disorder, so according to the DSM. So so this is code 300.6. The presence of persistent or recurrent experiences of depersonalization, derealization, or both. Depersonalization, experiences of unreality, detachment, or being an outside observer with respect to one's thoughts, feelings, sensations, body, or actions. So perceptual alterations, distorted sense of time, unreal or absent self, emotional and or physical numbing. Derealization, experiences of unreality or detachment with respect to surroundings. So, for example, individuals or objects are experienced as unreal, dreamlike, foggy, lifeless, or visually distorted. B, during the depersonalization or derealization experiences, reality testing remains intact. Folks, we understand there's reality, we're just not fully sensing it. The symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. I find this really fascinating, especially with new media and with technology. We're really comfortable saying this doesn't cause major impairment. I, for one, think these things cause major impairment in functioning and cause major issues in relationship building, in mental health, in stability, in job performance, in a variety of day-to-day sort of functioning aspects. The disturbance is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance, drug abuse, medication, or other medical condition. And E, the disturbance is not better explained by another mental disorder such as schizophrenia, panic disorder, major. These are essentially the criteria if you were to make a diagnosis of depersonalization disorder. And of course, I don't know these folks that I'm photographing. I'm just sort of playing around with this idea of, I think, selfie culture, of new media, of social media, of technology, and how it separates us from reality in a way. So much so that I could go up to someone very close and take a photograph of them in their most intimate of moments and they have no idea that I exist. These are just some examples of folks. I love this. I have no idea why this would be a great selfie, but it seems that maybe he's photographing something in the air, but it's just totally oblivious to what's around him. I think it's great. Thought this was amazing. In the middle of the street. Just some additional examples. The selfie stick walking, hard to see, but.
Did you colorize the?
Yeah, so essentially what I did is I focused on one person, and you'll know, and everything else is kind of black and white to kind of highlight the single element. Yeah. Talk quickly about another project, narcissistic personality disorder, something I think I may or may not sometimes meet criteria for. Part of the idea here is if you've never seen a therapist or you're not familiar with the DSM, these sort of diagnoses are meant to apply. The symptomology is loosely everyone manifests these behaviors more or less. You don't always meet full criteria for a diagnosis, obviously, but there are elements that all of us sort of portray. So in graduate school, when I was taking a psych class, I can recall, one of the faculty members talking about Thanksgiving sort of therapy, where your family says, oh yeah, you're diagnosing me. This idea that everything you see, everyone you come across, you have a quick diagnosis for. Of course, that isn't the case, but we all sort of exhibit certain symptomology of these things. We, at times, have been narcissistic, even though we might not meet criteria for. And I'm really intrigued by that idea, that, some of these things are just maps to kind of understand the psyche and how we work. A pervasive pattern of grandiosity and fantasy or behavior, need for admiration, a need for admiration. Who doesn't need that? A lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance. Is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Believes that they are special, unique, can be understood by or should associate with other special or high-status people. Require excessive admiration, have a sense of entitlement, is interpersonally exploitative, takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends, lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others, is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of them, shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. This was a project that I worked on. All of these images are from either celebrities, where I've pasted my face over these images, or really well-known artists. I made a series of videos as well, where I put my face over Marina Abramovic, where I put my face over Chris Burden, a lot of artists that I want to associate with. And I just said, why not? Why don't I just put my face over these folks? And that somehow makes me worthy in the same way. So The Psychology of Narcissism, a collection of chromogenic prints and video projections. Just some more examples. Again, a DSM. These often end up in my exhibitions, some sort of, you'll see that, like I said, in the Jack Straw New Media Gallery, but I often kind of diagnose the exhibition with these criteria. A video. Okay, another project. Post-traumatic stress disorder. This was a project done at Soil Gallery in Seattle several years ago, where I invited people to shoot me with paintballs at a rather close range, and you can see the joy of folks as they prepare to shoot me. They were invited, there was a list of rules, and they were invited to, on this sheet here, either shoot at me or shoot at the wall behind me, which was draped with a canvas, which I then stretched into paintings. But as you might expect, people found more pleasure in shooting the artist. So some examples. I read through, and this was part protection, was Pierre Bourdieu's Field of Cultural Production, which talks about, if you haven't read it, I highly suggest. It was just a total enlightening sociological study of the art market and the field of cultural production, about symbolic capital and cultural capital, and it really changed my sort of understanding of art making. So I thought I'd share that while people shot at me. There was one person who did not shoot me, and she is here. I did not know that, but my friend who was hosting, Matthew, explained this to me, that of all the people she thought it was wrong and she didn't feel comfortable doing it, her father, I think, shot me. But I thought that was pretty terrific. Morgan Kahn, you may know her. She's was a curator artist in the area. Nothing better than to have a pregnant person shoot you. Which brings us here. F40.298, Generalized Opus Foramina. F40.298 is the diagnostic code for the exhibition in Jack Straw New Media Gallery. F40.298 is I'll just bring up the criteria here. It really is essentially a specific phobia, is what F40.298. Sorry, thank you. F40.298 is utilized for specific phobia. I had originally thought, when I was considering doing this project, that the phobia would be related to either, it would be something like claustrophobia, being buried alive. But it turned out, as I sort of continued to kind of collect data, that I thought this was going to be a diagnosis that I gave to the earth. I was going to meet with the earth. This was the plan. I was going to dig holes across the state of Washington, and I was going to ask the earth questions. I thought if I dig holes and I drop a microphone and a video into these holes and I collect the response from the earth somehow deep down, that the earth would tell me secrets, that the earth would say, hey, this is what you need to know to move forward, to progress healthily. What I found is, and you might sense this when you're in the space, is that I couldn't hear the earth. I heard everything else going on outside. I heard people talking. I heard ambulances. I heard planes, cars, even in some of the most remote areas. I was in outside of Spokane in a really kind of bucolic rural area on the lake. All I could pick up were boats and people talking and cars that were really in the distance even. So I found ultimately, I mean, if there's a lesson here, it's that we need to do a lot less talking, I think. We need to listen a lot more to the planet, to stewards, and that's pretty clear, I think, with the data kind of as a case study, what I collected. But to continue here, this is the sort of diagnostic criteria for Generalized Opus Foramina, and I changed this very slightly. You'll notice the incorporation of the word whole. So, marked fear or anxiety about a specific object or situation outside of whole. The phobic object or situation outside of the whole almost always provokes immediate fear or anxiety. The phobic object or situation outside of the whole is actively avoided or endured with intense fear or anxiety. The fear or anxiety is out of proportion to the actual danger posed by the specific object or situation outside of whole and to its sociocultural context. The fear, anxiety, or avoidance is persistent, typically lasting for 6 months or more, eternity, I think, maybe in this case. The fear, anxiety, or avoidance of everything outside of whole causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of function. And the disturbance is not better explained by the symptoms of another mental disorder. So my assessment here is that everything, if we're asking the earth and the earth is my client, everything that exists outside of this small little hole is scary to earth. It has a clear sort of phobic response, fear, anxiety related to everything that exists outside of itself. And rightfully so, I think, given our current situation. So if you don't know what a foramina is, or it's essentially, this is a Latin root, that's essentially an opening. We use this in anatomy, I think, to talk about holes in the skull generally. So it's an opening inside the body that allows key structures to connect one part of the body to another, skull bones that contain foramina. So I was thinking, as I was like moving, as I was digging these holes, that the earth felt alive, right? It felt very much sort of like I was digging into something, almost like a brain of sorts, which is really fascinating, and that somehow is relieving pressure, or that I was getting at access to a point of knowledge, quite physically, but also I thought that I might be able to collect some data by doing this again. So here are some screenshots of what's in the space, and this is essentially just kind of a recreation of what I did. So I have these PVC pipes, just 2 of these, and I would go and I would dig the hole, and then I would put this pipe in and then drop a camera, a GoPro generally, into the pipe at the bottom. And you'll notice in the space you see these kind of skyscapes, almost these Tyrrellian kind of sort of geometric pieces. And these are actually just exactly what it is. It's just video recording of the sky above it, and the ambient noise that it collected during these times. So, and this is obviously just kind of a recreation of the earth. So I thought I'd show kind of how this happened. I did this for about 1.5 years or 2 years. We ended up postponing the show in part because of the pandemic, which gave me some more time to dig holes and be a weirdo artist and collect data for this show. And I probably did close to 150, I would say, holes across the state. Tri-Cities, Washington, Spokane, King County, went down south, to Aberdeen, all different locations, kind of, because I thought, my brother's a social scientist, and I thought, okay, like he always talks about generalizability, and it has to be generalizable. And so you got to get data from all these different points. And so for some reason that stuck with me. I don't really understand what it means, but I like the idea of going across the state and getting a bunch of different points, and then kind of making an evaluation or assessment based on that. Also really fantastic opportunities to explore the beauty of this state and its diversity and how awesome it is, how different it is when you go to the eastern part as opposed to the western part, north, south. It's just really geographically diverse. It's fantastic. And probably all of you know this, but being from Detroit originally, this is not something that, this exploration has been really meaningful to me. So I'm really grateful for the project to allow me to do something like this, to travel and see. So these are just a couple shots to kind of give you an idea. There are 3 videos in the space. I've been asked why I chose those videos. It was really an aesthetic decision, and some of the audio that kind of just stood out to me. There's some natural elements and a lot of kind of external stimuli that distorts the natural elements, which I was oddly attracted to. Thought it kind of make a case for this environmental sort of advocacy that I think is important here for us to do a better job of being a steward and listening to the planet. And then also the shape too. This PVC pipe allows in some really weird light. And so sometimes they were really opened up, and I didn't get that. In my head, I just really wanted this like nice vignette circle, and the color composition. So there's like a nice blue glow. I've been told that this feels extraterrestrial, actually, almost like we're on Mars or something, looking down at Earth, which I think is fascinating. And I'm still processing exactly what that means, but I think that's part of it too. This people wanting to leave this planet, people kind of abandoning this planet, people kind of saying, hey, we should consider, taking the species somewhere else, that it's absolutely essential. That kind of freaks me out, to be honest. And I understand the push. We are doing a lot of damage, obviously, and we're not the best stewards. But it seems like maybe we should focus our energies on curing or ameliorating or working on the pathology that is in us and that's present, that we're sort of causing and bringing about here. So again, this is the old kind of version of the encyclopedic DSM in the space, just kind of give you an idea of scale. It's about 6 feet, I would say. As I was showing some folks the installation last week, maybe I started thinking about that. I felt like almost I was buried under this. There was this idea of like me being buried under the space. I started to think a lot in my narcissistic sort of way about how I relate to this piece. And, is this, it's almost the perfect size of a body. There's something about being under the space and kind of, again, not exactly sure what that means. Most likely that I need more therapy, but this is just a close-up of the book. Some details. And I would love to show a quick version of the video. Let me just check where time is. I shut my phone off. I think I should be okay. My students often tell me, I'm sorry? Okay, great. My students tell me I talk a little bit too much. They say it maybe a little bit more directly than that. So I'm not sure if I can. Okay, let me play this video real quick. I have it on my website, so the quality isn't going to be as good, but see if I can full screen. Nice. maybe it's like my students, they're saying, now is a good time to. Now's a good time to take a breather. Just pause that. I'm happy to address any questions, or if folks would like to see any of the other images or talk specifically about this project or my practice as a whole. I kind of left a link up. If you'd like to get in contact with me, I'd love to hear from everyone either about the show or what your practice is. It's really nice for me to stay in contact with folks and build community and just kind of hear about cool art that's happening. So thank you so much to Jack Straw. Thanks for everyone for coming. And thank you for tuning in via Zoomlandia. Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, for your Facebook. Kidding. No, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
How long did you generally record in each location?
Good. Yeah, that's a great question. So it was different on each, you can only stand around for so long until people, which I'm very comfortable making, people looking at me like have no business being there. Yeah, 2 tubes out of the ground, no big deal, everything's cool. Normally about like 20 minutes. The videos that I chose loop at about 11 minutes, I think, in the space. So originally we had talked about using different types of microphones, and I think that this functions for me as kind of like a proof of concept almost. I think it would be really cool to dig deeper, to think about different structures and different mechanisms and tools to capture different type of audio and really tap in, go deep. There's also some concerns for me about, I don't want to mess things up. I don't really know what I'm doing. So I certainly don't want to, cause more damage or whatever. But yeah, generally about 20 minutes, 20 to a half an hour. Yeah.
That's great. How far down did you go?
Again, kind of contingent on, the space, and the soil, and where I was at, but not too deep really, maybe at most a foot, but again, I'd really like to, I think it would be really fascinating to go deeper. Like, I do think there's a metaphor there of going like 6 feet or under or something like that, and kind of thinking, what would happen there, so.
Yeah, if you went deeper, then you would definitely get other sounds from the earth, I think. I mean, if you were only a foot, did you say?
Yeah, about a foot deep, yep.
So then so you were also magnifying the sound that was coming down the tube.
I found, it's exactly right.
It's like
It was an amplification of just what was out there, which I think was a learning mechanism for like technically how to go about doing this, but also just I think I found that fascinating too, that it was like it's so loud, everything. Yeah, it's really.
There's a book, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, called 1 Square Inch of Silence.
Fascinating.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And he went all around the planet, basically, all around the Earth, mapping sound.
Beautiful.
And where he found 15 minutes of silence. He was in the Olympic force in the whole.
Oh.
Amazing.
Wow.
That's the only place. Like, you were talking about the hum from refrigerators or people's lawnmowers, but mostly just this is like so way before the pandemic. I think it was. Do you recognize that title, or did you read it?
Well, no, I know I've met him before.
Oh,
he lives
he lived in Joyce.
in the Northwest.
Because I had someone who was sort of renting out part of their farm to him while he was listening up there. But it's a while ago, probably like 2010 or 2015 or something like that.
Huh.
It was really fascinating.
I will check it out for sure.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Not much.
Alarming, right? It's for me, it's alarming.
It is alarming.
Yeah.
It's alarming. Yeah. But anyway.
Appreciate it.
It's
Thanks.
really interesting how you connect with the DSM and can
Yeah.
get back to these criteria for diagnoses. I mean, it's an interesting lens to practice, to do work, so.
And it's interesting to push it outside of people.
Right.
I appreciate, both of those comments. I think when I was in graduate school for art, it felt there was a push to move away from that, and I couldn't disentangle the sort of the psych work that I had done and the clients that I had met and the lessons and that I had learned, and I do think it's a really interesting instrument and a tool to apply in different ways. And as artists, we're resourceful folks. We do this a lot in a variety of different ways. Just, people use cameras very differently, right? Or brushes. So no reason why. So I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mary.
Is there some relationship between the three images that you are projecting in the gallery? I mean, my psyche is trying to create this relationship between them, and I'm thinking, well, this is a different time of day, but why did you pick those three images?
They're different geographic locations, and if I remember correctly, one is near Spokane, where Emily, where were we? Loon Lake. We were out by Loon Lake, and so one is from Loon Lake, one is from King County, Seattle proper, and then one, I believe, is from Tri-Cities, where I teach. But I really wanted to kind of broadly target the state, and kind of get a broad case study. But for the three I picked, again, I think it was more just like an aesthetic sort of decision. I had a couple with different clouds. I liked the color, the blue sort of element, and then I noticed that as I started to think about lighting the installation in the middle of the earth, it became kind of orange amber, which made me think of Mars, and there's all this discussion about exploring Mars. So I'm not sure, and I think different iterations. I think in a different space, maybe it would be really cool to consider, more than three, and different scale. That was something. Thanks to Joel and Levi too, and to Dax Arts for getting some projectors. But these are 4K videos. The projectors can only go so big, so I think scale is something I'd like to think about as well, and how to maybe go larger, and what it would mean to maybe even go smaller, and how that would affect the experience. Yes.
I'm extremely curious on the DSM and the diagnostic qualities of the DSM, and what your assumptions were going into it, as well as what your findings were coming out of it, and how those were either similar or different, or if you had assumptions going into it, what you would explore or experience. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was, it shifted a lot. I think what I heard and what I expected to hear, I think especially in some of the more rural environments, or kind of where there isn't a huge human presence, I thought I would hear more natural sort of sounds. I also didn't expect to get this tunnel feedback, which I think is really that amplification or that you were talking about. So I think that shifted my understanding of this as well, in kind of more this enclosed claustrophobic sort of sense, almost like it felt very. I think I ended up self-diagnosing, which I have a tendency to do. I think a lot of therapists do this, the transference and countertransference that happens in a therapeutic session. So I thought, okay, I'd meet with this client, Earth, and I'd learn about Earth. But I ended up just learning more about me and my relationship to the planet, and what I need to do better, and sort of how I can listen better. That's something that is really crucial in therapy, is listening. And just being, I think, a good human. And I do a lot of talking, and I think we all do. I think listening is something that's really important, and taking the time. So like there was all these lessons that came from this that I wasn't expecting. I thought it would be an easy sort of diagnosis of something and then I would move on, but it's yeah. I don't know if that.
It's never that easy.
It's never that easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this your first non-human diagnosis?
Oh, that's a really good question. Wow. I think. I'm trying to think. Well, yeah, I think this actually might be my first non-human sort of diagnosis, which is really fascinating. I've diagnosed processes like making different types of objects and things like that and said, oh, okay, look, this fits into conduct disorder, this fits into this, or things like that. Conduct disorder is something that comes up a lot for me. Sort of breaking rules, doing things that, which I think a lot of artists fall into this but I think again, like this became a self-referential sort of, which is the narcissism again, or sort of my involvement. But I think in terms of I've done a lot of work out. I did a show with North Cascades Institute up in the North Cascades, and I diagnosed the project as exhibitionism. I did a lot of work out in just out doing these hikes, kind of drag things behind me, and then I would hang these works in the natural sort of landscape in the forest, basically, and then photograph them. And I kind of thought about this exhibitionism, and I was, I think, diagnosing myself as an exhibitionist, like performing in this space where no one was watching. But as I think about it now, I think I was also diagnosing the environment around me that was that's always been exhibiting. It's always an exhibition, and it's been curating people walking along these trails since time immemorial, essentially, and kind of coordinating with these co-authors, which I think is really lovely. So I think there's elements, and it would be really fun actually to go through and think about, okay, is this all just human related, or have I been applying this? So, thank you. Yeah. Anything else? I don't know if we do online stuff. Some of my buddies, I don't want them to ask me any questions.
Let me see if we have any Facebook comments.
I'm not seeing any comments.
All right.
Woo!
They might flood in now, though.
Right, yeah. Yeah, thank you all so much. And Jack Straw, I'm sure you're all connected, obviously, but I say this, it's just been an amazing experience. Levi, Joel, Joan, everyone I've worked with, the engineers have just been really supportive and kind and really working to get my vision sort of manifest in the gallery, which I think is a really difficult task, and I'm just eternally grateful. It's been awesome, and we've got a couple other things planned. We've got a podcast, and then I think I'm going to be working with some youth towards the end of the show.
And people can write to sign up. So it'll be a youth and family workshop on the 22nd, right?
Okay.
So we decided on January.
Right,
22nd?
that's right.
So just email education@jackstraw.org if you're interested in that.
Education@jackstraw.org.
Yeah,
Okay.
interactive, youth and family, accessible to the blind and visually impaired.
Yeah, super excited about this.
If you didn't want to, I'm just want to give you some unsolicited advice.
Yeah, I love it.
You can enlist one of your students if you were interested in getting the film, all of the data that you have for people to observe it and think of it themselves. You could just do an Instagram account and post short, however long you wanted, of
Clips.
each of those locations, and just so you have a feed of being able to take all those in.
I love that.
It sounds a little bit obsessive, but it's just,
I'm there. That's
I know that's also in there.
that's in there, and I'm nothing wrong with that. That's a great idea. It's terrific. I wonder if folks, do you think folks would, so someone like me, I can get lost in something like that for the entire afternoon. I just often wondered if there's interest, for folks, or if they would spend the time to.
I mean, this is maybe a bigger discussion. I don't want to take over here, but the whole idea of social media, and you would, in a way, you could interact with that environment, because people that would come across that and would follow this would then, in their feed periodically, they would get each day or whatever frequency you establish for posting them would pop up in their feed, and they could, over time, take it not as a sit down and watch every single one, but every day have a moment with that.
Love it. It's beautiful. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's something I've mentioned James Turrell as, of course, major influence, but work at the Henry is terrific. But every time I go there, I sit in the space and I have a totally different experience, and it's just fantastic. Sometimes short, sometimes quick, and I could see that playing out in social media. It's just not something I've really thought of, so I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, it might even spark people to be more aware, I mean, if they were taking, maybe not responsibility for that feed, but interactive stewardship, perhaps.
Right.
Like getting the word out. Yeah, we need to listen more. I don't know.
Cool.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also just want to say that those 3 different projections, I had a totally different relationship with each of them. And the one was really mesmerizing for me, and the other 2 were not.
Huh. Was there, I gotta know.
Which one was
Yeah, which one?
it? Was the one facing the lobby, on that wall.
Okay, so when you walk in to the left.
No, when you walk into the...
To the right.
Like, I was facing the lobby watching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it,
Interesting.
yeah.
It was the same kind of, like, looking at the water.
Huh.
But I didn't have it, like, I couldn't watch the cloud one very long because it made me antsy. I wanted to see the clouds move.
Yeah, right. It's really slow. I have done I move the cursor just to make sure it's moving,
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And the other one, but that one was so great. I just was staring at it for a long time.
Oh, thanks for saying
And
that.
the
Cool.
visual, and as well as the sound, because you guys curated the sounds according to the video. So I wonder if that had an immersive quality to it, where you were looking at that one with the sound of that one affecting you a little bit differently. I don't know.
Huh.
May have been
Cool.
separated like that for you.
Love it. Any other questions or anything? Hope to stay connected if everyone is up for that. I don't know how best to do that, but please reach out. Levi, thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Oh, thank you.
Everyone for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you.